Yes, it's you're with us again, as indeed is Trevor Simpson. Very, very welcome.
Good morning.
Coming along from Warren Point, from the Church of Ireland community.
That's
in
correct.
Warren Point. Yeah. Honourable people. How's Harold, the good bishop?
Harold's good. He's full of vision and passion and all those things that clerics talk about. He actually has ordained, let's say, that we're going to have a mission for the entire of 2015 throughout the Diocese of Down. So that's a big undertaking.
Yes. How long is Harold in office?
I couldn't tell you.
He's a while, because I write about it in my column next week. In my archive, and it's quite a bit back in the archive. I had written about a day of prayer in Newry. When the Catholics and Protestants came together and perambulated between their churches in Newry. And Harold and John McAreevy prayed together in the Newry Cathedral, and David Jardine was down for, he was the prison chaplain throughout the worst of the Troubles. He was there, and Mark Ephraim Nolan of the Benedictines was there. Prayers were said at the Presbyterian Church in the corner of William Street. And it struck me that here we are in a week, and it comes into the paper next Tuesday, in a week that men and women of politics are going to sit down and try to reach agreement on flags, parades, and the past. Here we had, in the relatively recent past, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had the Catholics and Protestants of Newry praying together. And that can happen again.
Absolutely. And I think some people may regard that as trivial, but you know, my firm belief is that when the common man comes together like that, as it says in the book of Psalms, that where the brethren dwell together in unity, the Lord commands the blessing. And that's my prayer.
That's a good prayer.
As well.
It's a good prayer. And you know, when people come together, one of the first amalgams of people that I came across in the history of Northern Ireland was the Peace People, Joe Parker, when his son was murdered in Belfast. And he then went to Canada, but he founded the organisation, the Peace People. I think Joe was he was a Church of Ireland fellow. And he organised this, and we had a great parade through Newry for peace, and all of that occurred. It was hugely impressive.
Funny, just when you're talking about that, it reminds me of the day when that news bulletin came out that the IRA had announced a ceasefire. And I clearly recall I was driving down the M1 that day, and my mother was in the car with me, and we just became acutely aware of a profound sense of peace, and also of God's people praying. And you know, there were a lot of ingredients, let's say, to birthing the end of the conflict. But prayer was a very large part of that.
People, or you see, successive secretaries of state said to me, and we'd have dinner in the boardroom of the BBC and whatever, and they'd say, well, you know, we could deal with this if the people would give us the information. And I'm roaring at them over the cheese. The people don't know. The people were, as you say, were praying for peace.
That's right.
Because the people, Catholic and Protestant in Newry and in other areas, were victims. And they didn't know. So they couldn't. And I said this to the secretaries, the few secretaries of state I worked with and met, and that was the secret. But it's interesting that you sensed that prayer was on the move from people.
But when you think about that whole conflict, Rowan, and also about the debate that's going to be had next Tuesday, ultimately, conflict in society, I believe, boils down to identity. Do you know who you are? And you know, I think of a funny thing that happened up in Windsor Park in Belfast. What was it? It must have been 7 or 8 years ago now. It was the evening that Northern Ireland beat the mighty England 1-0, and David Healy scored that iconic goal. But I recall at the time that David Beckham was taking a corner.
You want to put that back on again?
Yeah.
Let me do it for you, shall I?
Got it.
It's gone. No, you got it. Keep that loose.
Yeah, I recall that David Beckham was taking a corner, and he was down at the Kop end of the ground, and you know, the 5,000 people in that stand were all pointing at him, shouting, "Who are you? Who are you?
Who are you?"
And this guy, you know, was the icon of, you know, football globally. And it was so funny, but it also reminded me of a conversation I had with David Irvine.
Yes.
Way back, that's 14 years ago now. David was working with Tommy Sands and myself in a project in Kilkeel, which is a town that, you know, has an acute sectarian issue.
Well, it has that issue, yeah.
And I remember the very first time David Irvine spoke in Kilkeel, he got onto the stage and he stuck out his chest and he put his thumbs in his lapels and he puffed his pipe and he just mused for a moment. And then he said, "You know what, people? I'm afraid of nobody." And there was silence. And he says, "Do you know why that is?" And people sort of, you know, whispered and thought it's probably because of Big Jimmy that's standing at the back door there. But he then continued to say, "I'm afraid of nobody because I know who I am."
Yeah.
And then he talked about his journey and about how he found himself in the Maze prison, and when the door of that cell slammed shut, he was in there for killing Catholics.
Yes.
And yet he then explained how Gusty Spence came alongside him and said, "Listen, young man, there's a book, start to read it." And so David Irvine's journey of education began. And he then started to realise the foolishness of what he had been involved in. And it then became his mission in life to go back to his constituency and to take his people back up to the other end of the street and say, "Listen, you don't want to be where I've been. It's not worth it. Nothing's worth that amount of tragedy."
It's an interesting enough scenario, because when you posed the question earlier, "Who am I?"
Yes.
There was an answer coming from me.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the first time that I have actually answered that question in the way I'm about to answer it now.
Yeah.
And I'm tying it into David Irvine. I know who I am.
Yeah.
You know, but my answer to that question, and I'm struggling to have the courage to say it.
Yeah.
And I'm balking at it.
Yeah.
But my answer to that question is, I am a follower of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Now that's as much as I can say. What do I mean by that? I mean that I've listened to his message, love your neighbour as yourself.
That's right.
And that's what I embrace.
Yeah.
I don't say I'm born again, I'm born 7 times, 8 times, twice. I don't say that.
Yes.
Because that doesn't do it for me.
Yes.
But what does it for me is the broken man, the historic figure going around Palestine, those 2,000 years ago.
That's right.
And saying, let's sort out this place and make it better for everybody.
That's right.
So, whereas I'm at a situation I can say that.
Yeah.
I truly fear nobody.
Yeah.
Because I know that. But David, even at that moment,
yes,
when he talked in Kilkeel, I rather think he wasn't proclaiming, I am a follower of Jesus. He may have been, if I got the chronology right, he may have been saying, I am a Protestant from a Protestant tradition. I'm confident.
Yes.
I'm a unionist.
That's right.
And he was proud of that. And well, he should have been.
But what came on the back of that, Rowan, and, you know, it ties in with the picture that's in a lot of people's minds at the moment. We're in 2014, and yet, as we know, 100 years ago in 1914, we moved into that horrible war at which my grandfather and his brother were gunners in the Royal Artillery. And, you know, in a sense, for decades in this wee country, people have been stuck in their trenches. And what Irvine was also saying that night was, listen, I know who I am, and I know who I am to the degree that I can actually get out of my trench. I can walk into no man's land, and there's a vulnerability in that.
Oh, there is, surely.
Right? Because you can get caught in friendly fire, as well as from the other side.
Yeah.
And you can engage with somebody from a different tradition, from a different trench, and then should you choose, you can go back to your trench.
Yes.
But you're not any less a person, in his case, from the Protestant tradition.
No.
In fact, he'd actually strengthened his position because he felt that by engaging with somebody of a different opinion, it didn't make him a lesser man.
No. And funny enough, that is constantly committed. Last week in particular, Maynard Hanna from Kilkeel was talking to me.
Well.
He was making strong, good points like that. And you're making them again today.
Yeah.
And I am confident enough in who I am to go down to the fellows in the Gavahi Road and say, look, I want to come in and help you put up your tricolour. Mm-hmm. Or I want to go to you, Orange Order, let me help you put the arch up.
Yeah.
And I do it.
Yeah.
I stand in the other man's shoes.
That's right.
And I fear nothing, you know. In the recent past, we've butchered each other, but now we have the opportunity of understanding each other.
We do.
And as with the same as Irvine, you know, he loses nothing by walking in the other man's shoes.
That's right.
He gains, he grows, and he becomes better informed. So next week's a big week because they're going to talk.
And yet there's a verse, you know, ringing in the back of my mind, Rowan. There's a verse in Scripture that says, the traditions of men have made the gospel of no effect.
Yeah, and have made the gospel of no effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is one of the tragedies of Northern Ireland, that folk can get so caught up within tradition that they actually lose the real essence of the message that this God that you talk about sent for us. Because ultimately, as you mentioned, when we come into that relationship with Christ and when we start to walk in step with Him, first of all, we find peace with God. Secondly, we then discover peace within ourselves. And then thirdly, we find peace with our neighbour. And that's part of that journey.
We bring peace.
We do.
You know, I often now would make the comment to people, you know, be happy and bring happy.
Yeah.
You know, there's no point in any other way because nothing can take you out. And that's the long and the short of it. But we started talking about Harold Miller, and I think Harold would have been the bishop when Robin Harris died, my old friend. And at Robin's funeral, Harold told the story that had been told to him by Robin's chaplain.
Yes.
And Robin was dying at the time. He had gone from the BBC into ministry and had been a Church of Ireland minister in Bangor, Hollywood for a short while, Bangor maybe. But he was there, and Robin had told the chaplain before he died. Obviously, he had told the chaplain. He said, "Look, I really, really feel that Jesus has come to visit me in what you're doing."
Yeah.
And that was quietly brought to the attention of the bishop, and the bishop used it at the funeral.
Yeah.
And it said everything, because, you know, it's that notion of gentleness and going through hell and high water for your neighbour, going into the other territory. Makes life meaningful, because, as you say, the traditions, or the Psalm says, the traditions of men create the gospel of no effect.
That's right.
You're not making a difference.
Not really.
No. What sort of week has it been for you?
It's been a good week.
What's made it good?
Well, it was my birthday this week, so
wow.
That's always a bit of a milestone. And it was my birthday yesterday, so it's just nice, you know, seeing those texts and those messages coming in from friends and family, far and near. I have a sister in Canada, and she left a crazy voicemail on my phone yesterday, and it's just great to be part of that. It's great to be alive, Ron.
Yeah, it is good to be alive,
And, you know, birthdays also give a time to reflect.
Yes.
And, you know, you can reflect on years in the past when you were prosperous, and you reflect on years of late that have been lean. Yeah. And yet, at the same time, you also realise that when you have Christ in your life, you appreciate the richness of life.
Yeah. Did you grab... I'm just trying to put some flesh on the bones of your belief.
Yeah.
Did you draw me to it by your reference to lean times and good times?
Yeah.
Did you go to the Christian message as a consequence of falling on bad times?
No. I was actually 21 years of age. And at that time in Warren Point, this would have been 1981. And, you know, troubles had been still fairly bad, you know, down around Newry and South Down and such.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a young person from the Protestant tradition at that time, that was a fairly closed environment that I lived in, and because of that, one of my best friends, Alan Warburton, who you know
yes,
is involved in the Lighthouse. Alan has been a great friend of me for over 40 years now.
Yes.
We were best friends in school and all that stuff. And Alan had found faith in Christ a number of years prior to when I hit 21. And I remember there was one night I was sitting in the car in the square in Warrenpoint with Warby. And we were talking about life and about God and about faith and all that sort of stuff, because we would have gone to different meetings and, youth groups and all that sort of stuff. And Alan said to me, "You know what, Simpson? You're like an elephant with its tail tied to a daisy hanging over a cliff." And it was a great picture, because it actually was fairly true of where I was in my faith journey, because I had discovered a richness and a promise in life that was very attractive to me. And yet, as a young man of 21 years of age, working in the bank at that time and having ambitions to be a bank manager and all that sort of stuff, I was still holding on to, let's say, the fleshy part of life. Where I just hadn't got the guts to let go and to let God be God. And that evening, I went in to my home that was above the post office in Warrenpoint. Opened up my wee Gideon's Bible that I got in school, and turned to the book of Romans, and the verse that just happened to fall upon is Romans chapter 13, where it says, "The day is long spent, the night is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness and put on the glorious armour of light." And it was just as if God took me by the lapels and said, "Excuse me, but I'm talking to you." and on the back of that, there was no blinding lights.
No.
But I just, in my heart, I made a decision, as you referred earlier to the fact, I made a decision to become a follower of Jesus. And I started to make my, feeble steps, and I've fallen many times since then.
Of course you would have done,
and I still fall. But the lovely thing is that you just know, as you journey through life, and as you look back over 3 years and 10 years and 30 years, you just know that He's been with you.
I know exactly what you're saying. And this week in the paper, I wrote about the timeline. I wrote about the chart. And I said quite simply that on my voyage, I have the compass. It's simple. I know where I'm going. I know the issue. I have my compass and I've got my chart. And that comes directly from Christ. So love your neighbour as yourself. Caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Where you find charity and love, there you find God. Now, that's there, and I was clear of that in my writing. I said, but then it gets difficult. I have the compass. I have the chart. But I'm not sure yet about the destination. And that's not heaven or hell. That's not what I'm talking about.
That's right.
That's the destination, that there is a God.
That's right.
The most I can say is that I hope there's a God. With strong and determined hope. That my search is the search for that God.
But interesting point you make there about the compass and the guide, because in our own ways, there's times when we may want to take control and we want to plan the route. But we can discover in time that may not be God's plan. He may have a different reason. It reminds me of a story that was told. I remember hearing this 30 years ago when Judith and I had just married and moved to Kilkeel, and at that time Judith was from a Presbyterian tradition. And we would have gone to the Mourne Presbyterian Church, which is a bastion of Presbyterianism.
It was big of you.
That
was a big sacrifice.
And it's 1,300 people in there on a Sunday morning, and a choir of 120, and Stella Chambers at the organ. And it's big time Presbyterianism. Reverend David McGahey, who's now Dr. McGahey, he was the minister at that time. I recall he told a story about a sheep, and at that particular time, Dr. McGahey's daughter, Lynn, had been ill, and she lived in Hilltown. So Dr. McGahey was journeying from Kilkeel up through Spelga to go to see his daughter. And as he drove up that road towards Spelga, there's steep cliffs on the valley on either side.
It's true,
And he noticed there was a sheep stuck on a ledge. And he knew the farmer who owned that sheep. So he actually called the farmer when he got home, and he said, "Jimmy, one of your lambs is stuck on a ledge up there on that mountain road." And the following Thursday, 2 days later, he was driving up the same road and he saw the same sheep on the same ledge. And when he got to his daughter's home, he actually phoned the farmer and says, Jimmy, I actually thought you were a better shepherd than, you know, what I'm seeing here. But that lamb is still on the ledge. And so he had a bit of a rant. And then the farmer said to him, well, can I speak now? And the farmer said, I'm a good shepherd.
Yeah.
And I love my sheep.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to pick that lamb up tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Because what I'm going to do is, that's a very narrow ledge that sheep's on. And I've got to climb down there. And if I had to climb down on Tuesday when that lamb was still full of its own strength, it probably would have carried me and the lamb over the cliff. He said, but I'll go down tomorrow morning because I know that lamb is on its last legs.
Yes.
And so when I reach down to gather it in and to take it back to the fold and restore it,
powerful.
That it'll just rest in me.
That's powerful.
Isn't it mighty?
That is a mighty, mighty, mighty bit of work.
But it reminds me of that verse in the book of Isaiah that says, we like sheep have gone astray.
Yes.
Everyone has turned to his own way.
Yes.
And yet the Lord laid on Jesus the iniquity of us all.
Yeah.
So lovely imagery, but a real story in it, because so often we can go down paths that we're not supposed to go, but God lets us. And in his grace, when we're ready to turn to him, he's just waiting to embrace us.
I so hope you're right in your story.
Yeah.
Because it's the greatest hope we have for the future.
It is.
And all I can say is that I'm searching.
Yeah.
And I'm diligently searching.
Yeah.
And I'm questioning.
Yeah.
And I'm obeying.
That's
I'm
good.
doing the things that caritas et amor.
That's right.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And you're in there doing your bit because you know it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
There is a naturalness to it, you know.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about the way things were at the heart of the Troubles. We were a people who were riven by all of the awfulness of what we were coming through.
Yeah.
My friends in Nigeria are coming through it now.
Yeah.
Protestant families in Newry moved away.
They did.
You didn't. In
Well-
Warren Point. You didn't. Your family stayed.
We stayed.
Why did you stay?
Well, my father was a postmaster. But like we got bombed out in 74, £300 car bomb, just totally demolished our home. And yet by the same token, you know, we didn't suffer as other families that we knew very closely suffered.
The wee girl up beside the police station.
Exactly.
Who was in the hardware shop.
And well, even the man that sat in the very next pew to us in church, my father's best friend, Ivan Toombs. You know, Ivan shot dead in the docks in Warren Point. Another young man that sat 10 seats up on the right-hand side, Richard McKee, in the UDR, blown up at Castlewellan. Another young man, named Wilson, who also belonged to our parish. And then there was John Dowd, of course, Jack Dowd's son. Jack was like a second dad to me. He played in the Silver Band with me. And Jack's son, John, who was an inspector in the police, just round the corner in Edward Street. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time one day. Mortar bomb come in. John was killed. So, yeah, we remained. Because what we also recognised was that, okay, we didn't have the direct threat because we weren't involved in the security forces, right?
Yes.
But my father also recognised that the people that were involved in this trouble were very much the minority of society. And
He's a wise man.
And the good people of Warren Point, regardless of tradition, were very much our friends. You know, and in those times when we went through robberies and bombings and all that type of thing, day after day after day, the same people were coming in saying, Jimmy, we're praying for you. You know, we're with you. And they helped them in many other ways. It is a huge thing. So again, it's about that. It's about that love that's shown in community, and you know, many of those people are followers of Jesus as well, from St. Peter's and you know, the other churches.
That resonates with me because when I was the head of radio current affairs and deputy head of news and current affairs in the Beeb, one of my staff was a girl called Noreen Erskine.
Oh yes.
And Noreen had done something, and there was something had happened, and it went out on the 9 o'clock. It needed to be changed. And then at 11 o'clock, Ian phoned me, the big fella, and he says, I want to say to you that was wrong, that was put out there. He said, I want that sorted. I said, look, Ian, And he said, I will see my solicitors.
Yes.
I said, Ian, look, it's very, very simple. It's been done.
Yeah.
I have dealt with it. Noreen has looked at the story again.
Yeah.
It's all done. If you'd listen to the bulletin, you'll find that's okay. That's all right. That's good. Then I said, now, you're mentioning solicitors. Can I talk to you about me going to my solicitor about you, Ian?
Yes. Yeah.
He says, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I said, you, at a rally outside the City Hall, referred to me as the Republican news editor of the BBC from Newry.
Yeah.
And he said nothing. I said, will I tell you why you're wrong?
Yeah.
He said, speak to me, go on.
Yeah.
I said, well, my father is dead today because he had a bookie office in Newry and he was robbed by the IRA on 6 occasions.
Yeah.
And he was worn down of strength and spirit to nothingness.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, a bad winter took him.
Yeah.
And there was quiet the other side from Ian.
Yeah.
He said, I have been given wrong information, he said. That was it.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was a perception that here was Rowan brought into the world by the Protestant midwife of Mary Street. That's what we had. My grandmother was the Catholic. I don't know why it didn't work out that way. But anyway, here was that there was a perception of me who went on to found the Alliance Party and be Alliance Party, that I was in some way a Republican news editor biased against him. So, you know, the gift to God to give us, to see ourselves as others see us. They were getting it wrong.
That's right. Presumption can be an evil thing.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that prayer in the litany, and you would be familiar with it within the Catholic tradition too. We do not presume to come to this side table, trusting in our own righteousness, but in thy manifold and great mercies. But I just love that phrase, we do not presume. And we should never presume, because we can never truly understand where that other person is.
It's true. You need to.
So we've just had it. We have to have that gift of love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness in our hearts.
Talking of love, you saw my promo for the book this week.
And I loved it.
Really?
Yeah, I did. It's beautiful, Rowan, because there's a couple of things come through on it. One is excellence. And again, I believe that's part of our walk as Christians, because, you know, be excellent in everything that you do.
Yes.
But what resonates through it, Rowan, is this message of compassion and consideration. And there's a challenge comes out of it as well, because you just see the evidence of a journey that's taken place over years. And I suppose it brings you to a point of legacy, Rowan. And, you know, that's a wonderful thing to see.
Well, the book comes out on the end of July. I'm spending this weekend selecting the last images for it. And that's the difficult bit. The writing was all easy, but the final images, to get them right and make sure that when the book comes out, there's nothing you've left out that everything's covered. Caritas et Amor promo. That's what you will see. That's what Trevor saw during the week. And please try and pick it up as we say farewell to Trevor this morning. But Caritas et Amor, in the footsteps of love, that's the title of the book. A work of tribute to the SMA Fathers of Africa and India and the Sisters of Our Lady of the Apostles. Also a tribute to Mr. Balu, the Hindu man, who went into the forests of southern India and found Tony's parents, the little boy, who we rescued and went and looked after. And it was the Hindu man who worked with us there. Great people.
Amazing.
All God's people have a place in the choir.
They do. Some sing low and some sing higher.
You go out. God bless you. Take care.
Thanks, Ron.
All the best to you.
Good to talk.
Good to talk.
Take care.